Welcome. I'm Carla Sertin, a group editor at ITP Media Group, and today we are going to discuss non-endemic brands who are entering the gaming industry. With me here today to discuss this topic is Snickers brand manager Ibrahim Tawil and BMW's regional sales and marketing director Lars Nielson. So thank you both for joining me today. I'm very excited to start this conversation. It's definitely an interesting time to be, jumping into the gaming vertical. So I'm very eager to hear about how your brands are doing that and how they're adapting to kind of changes in that industry. So to start with, though, I would like to know a little bit more about each of your brands and your roles within your brands. So starting with Ibrahim, I think, if you could introduce yourself a little bit about what you're doing.
Sure. So I look after, as you said, Snickers for our region. It is what I would say the second biggest chocolate brand we have in our business and the third biggest chocolate brand in the region. And so, I think a lot of people are very familiar with Snickers. It's not a traditional chocolate bar, it's a candy bar that exists in a lot of moments. And what we're trying to do essentially is to find new ways to get that connection between consumers and between our brands and to create more smiles.
And Lars, if I could hear a little bit from your side as well, introducing yourself and kind of what your brand is doing.
Sure. Pleasure to be here. So my name is Lars Nielson. I'm taking care of sales and marketing for BMW Group in the Middle East. So that means from Lebanon in the west to Pakistan in the right, the south, how we have set ourselves up here. We work through an importer network with one importer in all markets except for the UAE where we have two. And for sales and marketing as such, it's the obvious disciplines. It's the actual sales in units. It's production, it's logistics, product price, and obviously communication as such that we take care of. Yeah.
Okay, and so let's just dive right in then. Tell me a little bit about a success story, where you implemented a marketing campaign within the gaming or esports verticals. Ibrahim, I'll start with you again. If you could give us an example of a success story from Snickers.
Yeah, sure. So Snickers in the Middle East is quite new to the space of gaming and esports. Our first exploration into this territory must have been about 2 years ago, where we tried to activate the brand through the football platform, but rather focused on esports. So one of the biggest challenges we have had in the past as an organization is the fact that we are not actively involved in any sort of sponsorship of major tournaments. So when activating around moments like big snacking moments like the World Cup, and that's when that moment was, the challenges we've found is that we can't directly associate. And so we use other platforms like esports in order to be relevant. So by getting involved with gaming, with esports tournaments, with titles such as FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer, we're able to sort of bring that theme of football to life around an existing moment and occasion that's relevant to consumers. So the specific situation I was talking about happened 2 years ago. It was the first sort of dabble that we had in this space. It was a massive success for us because it was actually interlinked with a major activation around the World Cup. It was sort of, let's say, what really created our appetite to try and push this a little bit further. As a part of the Mars group, as Mars Wrigley globally, we've had a lot of success in other markets around gaming. So Wrigley, under the 5 Gum brand, if you're familiar with it, has seen a lot of success activating gaming esports tournaments as well as just gaming communications in both the US and in China. And those are things that we're trying to bring to our market over here, especially given the accelerated pace of growth for the vertical.
And Lars, if you could touch on a few success stories from BMW. I know there have been some big stories in the recent past.
Sure. So we're also relatively new to esport and to gaming, and even a bit newer. Let's say the regional approach here started in the beginning of this year, although we had a bit of preparation beforehand. But eventually we're banking on the initiatives already taken by our mother company in Munich, the headquarter. Made a sponsorship and activation of 5 of the biggest teams in the world, so esport teams. Here in the region, we decided to go a little differently about it. We would typically, very often, we would go with a sponsorship and an activation together with a communication campaign on topics like this. However, this time we went a little differently. So basically, we built a platform for BMW called Battle of the Gamers, and basically invited gamers to participate. So essentially, we created our own tournament. But not only our own tournament, we had a couple of activations in place here. So obviously the tournament, and that was the biggest effort that we put in as well. We having studied or investigated this industry a bit, we found that engaging on a let's say on a slightly more profound level would be a good idea. So basically, trying to build a little bit of credibility. It's a little bit of a humble approach. You could also argue to the extent that I think I have a bigger need to and a bigger desire to speak to and with the gamers and the segment than they actually necessarily have a need to speak with me. We also wanted to create something for the esport world. So essentially, what we did was, apart from the actual tournament, we built as well a podcast series that created to create really some content, tell some good stories. People who have developed in this sport over time, from all walks of life, really, which was fairly interesting. And we created we called it the Level Up Academy, where some of the semi-pros and the pros that were playing in our tournament were handing out tips, hints, pointers, and did some coaching sessions online for let's say more casual gamers to make them improve their game, basically. So the whole setting was interesting. We ran it across the region. We honestly didn't really know what to expect. We launched this right at the beginning of Ramadan, where also the pandemic hit and everyone was sent home. So timing was probably more or less ideal here, and the interest that we gained was honestly overwhelming. And obviously that leads, as a success, you could say that leads to a big interest in continuing this going forward with the next season for this in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the common point just to start with is, oh, I'm sorry, Lars, could you mute the microphone when I'm speaking? I'm getting an echo back from. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so the common theme that I'm seeing, obviously, just to start with, is that this is a new approach. We're testing, we're seeing, what works and what might work going forward. So I think the first thing I would like to know is kind of, what were some of the big lessons learned from your first steps into, entering the gaming market and esports market in the region? And I'll start with you again, Ibrahim, if you could tell me a little bit about the biggest lessons learned.
Okay, sure. So I think for us, it's a bit different because our biggest drive into the gaming space is going to be in 2021. And so I would say we probably haven't even hit the surface or scratched the surface of what we can learn and what will be there. I can tell you through all the research that we've been doing and through all of the data that we've been digging through to try and figure out exactly what the right thing to do is that based on what we've seen from the 5 GUM teams around the world, it's very important to do 2 things. The first is to be in the gaming space in a relevant manner to the brand and to consumers, because anyone can just jump in and sponsor a tournament. Anyone can just jump in and be a part of it. And if that doesn't fit the brand identity, if that doesn't fit the way the brand is supposed to be perceived and speak, then that really usually doesn't work. I'd say the second very big thing, and that's super relevant to us, is with all of the trends of changing lifestyles, and people becoming more health conscious, and even just media consumption changes, what we found is that it is very difficult for us to continue to reach relevant audiences. Gamers make up a massive part of the total consumer base that we're trying to reach. And it is a significantly more engaging platform than traditional social media or digital communications. And TV also doesn't play the same role or have the same weight that it once used to. And I think for us, the second biggest learning is that this can be a massive driver or lever for us to be able to reach consumers that have essentially lapsed, that may not be thinking of our brands, and that may be looking for a different value proposition or a different social dynamic or conversation with major brands.
And Lars, from your end, what were the major lessons learned in your first steps kind of into this vertical?
Well, I think I can echo quite a lot of what Ibrahim was mentioning here. As I said, we did some studies initially on who is actually gaming these days. First, you want to take out the cliche of who's actually doing that. That's obviously that's step number one. But once that, and that's where this podcast series actually comes in. We had a policeman there. We had a behavioral psychologist included in the podcast series, and so on. And I think the interesting thing here was that they were gamers themselves. Right, so it's people from all walks of life that joined in here, and that was one of the learnings that we had. I completely agree with the fact that you don't adapt to fit in. You still come across as the brand that you are. Yeah, we exactly the same learning that we had. We had good help by the fact that we from on a worldwide level, obviously we're engaging with 5 of the biggest teams. That gives a certain presence. But I think what is relevant for us, and was it a learning? I would more say it underlined that we were right in our assumption from the beginning. Is our interest is a little less on the actual branding, but more on the enabling side. From our point, our core value is joy, right? And if you attend a couple of esports tournaments, whether you watch them streamed online or whether these days we don't have the offline big festivals taking place, but we all hope that they will come again. The amount of joy that's taking place there is just immense. And I think from BMW side, that's primarily what tricked us, because that amount of excitement and dedication, passion, the urge to continuously grow and become better doing what you like to do there's a very, very close link to how we develop, build, and even sell cars. And obviously we are trying to create that link as an enabler then, because we enable in the end what all the gamers, what the whole community actually like to do. And for I'll put this diplomatically now, for a relatively little investment compared to the amount of media money we normally would be tossing out for a car launch or whatever. The amount of content we created, the engagement, the reach we achieved, and everything was online. Yeah, we had no offline activation at all. I find it, to be very honest, very difficult to find a more accurate channel to communicate what I have a need to communicate from a brand point of view. That was absolutely key learning for us. We hoped it would be that way. We could see it on the numbers afterwards that was indeed also the case, and obviously that sparks a lot of motivation for us to continue.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you made, kind of comparing traditional media to this this kind of new way of getting your brand across. And I'm curious to hear, is there a way for, or do you think there is potential in merging kind of more traditional media with these newer forms of, or these newer ways to reach your audience? Lars, I'd like to start with you just because you did make that point. Do you see that potential in merging traditional and these new ways of reaching your audience?
Yeah, I definitely. It's in the end, whatever media, whatever communication channel you're using, you're always looking to optimize, right, and be as efficient as possible. And I think that goes just the same here. Our initiative here, we had part of the communication and part of the messages we wanted out in the top, at the very top of the funnel, and then we wanted some further down mid funnel and even lower funnel. We went also tactical in over the approximately 2.5 months that we went on with our first season of the tournament. And obviously here we had a certain mix, right? So we were not always in the same channel. We didn't always go by the same choice of media. So in the end, it is a mix. We were ambitious. We didn't have only one objective with the full initiative, so that led us to obviously use multiple. The one thing that we were missing, and I underline this again, Esport obviously is digital, and it is to a large extent online, no doubt about it. But the offline part that we, due to the circumstances, could not activate during our first season, I hold for absolutely vital. And having talked to quite a lot of teams, organizers, even gamers over the last months, it is also very clear that everyone is looking forward a lot to be able to meet physically again, because that excitement that I was mentioning just before obviously is what drives the whole community a lot as well. The conventions, the big gatherings, and obviously the big tournaments, which are sports events, right? Like the big sports events as we know them, absolutely vital for the community and for that industry as well going forward. So that part is what is really missing, and I hold it for fully possible to get a lot more efficiency, and obviously also the lower part of the funnel here to really get that activated once the offline part comes in.
Yeah, and Ibrahim, I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of merging traditional outlets with esports and gaming.
Honestly, I couldn't agree more with everything Lars was saying there. And I really do believe that this is such a big space that can be integrated very well with a traditional communications or activation campaign. The space is massive everywhere, from physical live tournaments when we can actually go back to those, to communications platforms or media reach platforms like Twitch and YouTube gaming and Facebook gaming, all the way down to the actual tournaments themselves as opportunities for gamers to engage with each other and with brands. I think you can leverage each one of these spaces of gaming within this vertical to drive different objectives and to unlock different parts of that funnel. This is something we're super excited about. We were really for lack of better words, bummed out to not be able to have a live tournament for what we're planning. But we think it's still a great opportunity to get into this space today. I mean, honestly speaking, we already feel like this has been moving at an insanely accelerated space, and we are already quite late into the game. So we're super excited to just get involved and learn as we go.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that it's very clear from both of you, this isn't something that's going to stop. So it's something that you're still looking ahead to for more growth and more development. So I'd like to better understand maybe, what are your, where do you see the opportunities, let's say in the next year, in the midterm, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth when we're looking at, kind of moving into that gaming and esports space, for your own brand activation? And Lars, maybe if we could start with you on that one.
Sure. So we put our first tournament season we put together very, very quickly. The second one here now we have had a little more time to plan. So we're gonna expand here. So one thing that we're doing is we're not doing this only as on a Middle Eastern level. We will be driving this down into each individual market to expand the number of participants. We'll be experimenting a bit with the games that we're playing. We saw in our first season that some of the games that we were offering, not all were equally popular. So here we will make sure that we're looking obviously to get even more volume on this. So getting into the market and mixing games a bit is an opportunity there. As we went along, so BMW has been activating sports or been active in a lot of different sports over decades. One of the sports that we're very active in is motorsport, obviously, for natural reasons. And our central colleagues have already experimented a lot and are hosting online racing cups on a couple of different platforms. We think that's possible fully to take on as well here for us. So racing definitely is one of the new games or new platforms that we would like to integrate in our second season. And there is so far, because there has been prize money up in the first tournament season that we had. With money, obviously, you're attracting semi-pros and pros to a large extent. What we would like to do is as well to go a little broader and have the casual gamers join in. And one of the fastest growing sub-segments of esports or gaming in general is mobile games and games for tournaments for games that are on mobile devices. And here we will be making an effort as well for our second season that we're coming into. So that's some of the direction, at least, that we are heading in. The second season is due to launch within a very short time frame. And there, obviously, we're looking forward to experimenting even more and learning even more. As Ibrahim also said here, I think I mentioned earlier, I really mean learn, because we at this point in time we actually don't really know what the results will be. But given what we've seen from the first season and obviously all the public numbers available for esports and gaming in general speaks for themselves. We have obviously high hopes for this. So yes, definitely we're expecting.
Yeah, and Ibrahim, you said earlier, 2021 is really the year for entering this market. So tell me a little bit about Snickers' plans and, if there's any shift in strategy compared to this year.
Yeah, sure. So again, I think there are so many similarities between how we're both approaching these situations or this vertical, and I think we're going heavy, or we're doubling down in 2021 with esports. We really want to start there and build up, but as an organization, we are strong believers in mass reach. We do drive or focus on driving mass reach. The biggest challenge we've had in the past, as I was saying previously, was that as the media landscape has shifted and as consumers have changed their habits and behaviors, it's been more difficult to reach those consumers. And so what we're going to be exploring significantly more is how to communicate with gamers, how to communicate with gamers of all walks of life, the casual gamers all the way to the gamers that just want to watch other gamers play, and how we connect and contact them throughout the year as a sort of constant form of communication. As TV loses relevance in the market, as it becomes more difficult to reach people on, multiple screens and to maintain their attention, this, I think, for us becomes a very strong potential tool to have an engaging and meaningful way to reach mass audiences, or at least a portion of mass audiences that we're no longer relevant to. I think beyond esports for us, where we'd really like to start moving into eventually is live tournaments once we can actually get there. Mars Wrigley globally has a lot of experience with this, and it's something that we can't leverage at the moment, but we are really looking forward to getting into.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that just reminded me of something you said earlier, which is looking for the snacking moments, and there are definitely a lot of snacking moments in when you're gaming. So so there's definitely some relevance there. Well, another thing that did come up earlier in the conversation was kind of, you're both expressing that you're late to the game. Many brands have been a little bit late to jump into esports in the region, and you could say that it has lagged behind compared to other markets like Asia, like North America. So I'm wondering, does that present any challenges? Does it present opportunities for you in moving into the esports vertical in the region? So we're looking specifically at the region. Lars, if you could start us off.
Does it represent opportunities, potential? Well, I would, yes, of course it does, right? Because I could say anyone who considering currently whether they should do it, I would say no, don't. Leave the space for me and Ibrahim. That's much better. But look, I so far have not seen or received, even though there has been basically no physical contact between us as a brand and everyone who we're talking hundreds of thousands who across the region joined in either playing or watching our first season. We have had basically no negative feedback, no negative comments, even scanning social media. It has been very gratifying, and I think to that extent, the fact that you come across, as I said, I used the word humble before, yeah? And it's it's not exactly the right word to use here, but if you're true, if you're honest, my experience right now is the feedback you get from the community is very, very positive. Everyone appreciates the fact that the bigger brands are jumping on board and are investing in this as a sport as well. I think you have to imagine that even though it's a cliche that the classical esport gamer is a 16-year-old who's sitting in darkness in the parents' basement eating pizza and drinking cola. But even though it's a cliche, there's some truth to this as well, yeah. Because I think there's a lot of maybe people at our age or a little younger that actually comes from there to some extent, right? But I agree with Ibrahim. The space for still a lot of men's and a lot of more activation in this arena is definitely there. The way you're coming from and what you want to achieve, you need to be very clear with. I think that's it, because the way you are greeted says a lot in this context. And here, honesty is definitely a key word.
And Ibrahim, from your side, any of the challenges and opportunities that you've faced in entering the esports and gaming vertical in the region specifically?
So I think Lars touched on something interesting and important, which is it really depends on your objectives. Your objectives will define how you do it and what you're going to experience going through it. I think if we take a step back and we look at it from a general perspective, it's great that, well, not great, but it's okay that we're late because we can learn from so many others that have already done it everywhere else in the world. And a lot of data suggests that a gamer is a gamer no matter where in the world they are. There may be nuances for sure, but you can still generally reach them in a relatively similar manner. So I think from one side, or from one perspective, that's also great. I think the big challenge is that up until, let's say, this summer, a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the capabilities didn't necessarily exist to deliver top-notch quality gaming platform experiences to people in our region specifically. I know from personal experience that the number of organizations offering to help to support and deliver gaming activations, esports tournaments, etc., has increased astronomically over the last 6 months. And so that's great. It's great that everybody's sort of opening their eyes to the opportunity. I also genuinely believe that the opportunity for large organizations like BMW and Mars Wrigley is to actually help build this ecosystem. With advertising dollars from our brands, we can further push the gaming vertical in the region and turn it into something bigger than what it currently is. And so I think there's an opportunity to make this space even bigger than what it is today. There's a lot to be learned from the rest of the world, especially looking at China. We're just really excited to keep trying and keep pushing regardless of the challenges.
Yeah, and again, one of the common themes that we keep coming back to is learning, right? And it's really learning on the go. We may have said you may think that you've been a little bit late to the game, but there's always going to be people who are even later than you. So I would like to ask you, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to advertise in the gaming vertical or in esports? What tips would you give them? Ibrahim, if we start with you.
Sure. I think the general advice that I would give is don't be afraid to fail and learn. I mean, this really does apply to everything, but jump right in, do the research and the data mining that you do need to do to validate the proposition, but jump right in and learn because there's no other way to do it. And this is absolutely the right time to be involved in this space. So for me, it's just full steam ahead and make sure that you establish the right KPIs for your campaigns in order to be able to judge and evaluate the results and to understand what's worked for you, what hasn't, and how to fine tune your strategy.
Lars, your take?
Yeah, I would more or less echo this. I think most companies, most corporations, so small or bigger, they have their ways of evaluating whether a new initiative, a new approach makes sense. That for sure should be utilized just the same. Again, the numbers, what goes on in esport and within the gaming community is, I'm assuming, more or less clear and available to all of us. So to the extent that you want to have access to a very, very fast growing community of very affluent, very dedicated people, to that extent, just go for it. Yeah, and I think one thing I can say that we did spend some time on from the beginning was to refamiliarize ourselves with actual gaming. So I arranged in our office here. I arranged online tournaments. We got some casters in to comment on this. And it's for some of us, we're doing it on a daily basis. For some of us, it's 10, 15 years ago since the last time we were sitting in front of a PlayStation or a PC playing any kinds of game. And we took the opportunity simply to start playing, to get a feel for what is this actually today. We went to, that was the end of last year, we went to a couple of conventions, which was totally convincing in terms of excitement and engagement. but just to see that, I can only recommend really to go ahead and do this. And one of the interesting in that context, well, one of the things that actually comes out of this is we have a regional managing director here today who is among the top players in the world on Call of Duty. It's just one of the results over the last almost a year now that we've been engaged here that has come out of this, and it's been it's really been a fun journey to be on, and for a lot of maybe not a lot, but for quite some other initiatives that just within BMW or within the industry even that I know that people are embarking on, it's not a lot of them where you can say we actually had a lot of fun along the way. And normally it's been hard work, but the fun is relatively rare, I would say, out of my experience. So yeah, as a couple of suggestions for how to attack this, I could suggest it.
So my key takeaway from this entire conversation is that we should all be playing more video games. That's it. We should get all of our management to play more video games and get connected on that level again. I love it. Well, that's all the time we have, but I would like to thank you both for joining me in this discussion. It's been fascinating. I can't wait to see what comes out in the next year and beyond, you know, as the esports vertical matures and we see bigger and bigger brands joining in. So thank you very much for, contributing your insight. It's really been a wonderful conversation. And thank you to our audience for tuning in, for listening to this conversation, and stay tuned because there's a lot more to come.
وأعزائي المشاهدين، هذه كانت محادثة جدا غنية بالمعلومات عن الماركات. مارس، بي ام دبليو يدشون معانا في عالم الجيمنج، جدا شيق. والآن أعزائي المشاهدين مع الجيمنج والسوشيال ميديا، عندنا وايد جيمرز يدشون معانا في عالم الجيمنج، تعرفون من اللي موجودين عندنا الحين هنا اليوم. وطبعا ساحة السناب شات ساحة جدا غنية بالجيمرز. فخلينا نشوف معانا شنو الموضوع مع الجيمنج والسناب شات. Ladies and gentlemen, right now I'm going to talk about Snapchat, Snap Inc. and gaming. So, game on. Let's go.